Quick Sip the Green Knight, at your service.
Oh, we're doing the name thing. Ask later.
Dang it!
What?
She's VP.
I am the Poetry Ninja, dressed as Hachiken from Silver Spoon today.
Who?
And I'm Matt.
Just Matt.
And the anime movie we watched today was The Wind Rises. As far as I can tell, it's about a guy engineering planes.
Well, he's a very well-known engineer of aircrafts in Japan. I don't know much about him. I didn't know much about him before the film, and that's really all I have to say. He was very instrumental in building many of the warplanes that were used during World War II for Japan.
World War II.
But outside of that, there wasn't much else that he did.
Yeah, I figured midway through the movie it did seem like it was World War II, especially a certain event that seemed to have been going on in the back.
Well, Hitler was mentioned in the movie.
He was. I don't know, man. Half the time during this movie, I was literally playing a Yu-Gi-Oh!
Okay.
It was fun.
So this is his...
Well, although I will say this, most of the film is kind of dry. The more interesting stuff actually happens in Germany. Most of the rest of the film is kind of a little dry and bland in a couple of places. But that's just for me.
Yeah, the movie, it seemed like it played some scenes that was short. It seemed like one of those movies where it was a time skip every few scenes.
Yeah. Like we see the main character, I'm sorry, his name is...
Jiro.
Jiro?
Jiro Horikoshi.
You looking this up?
Yeah, why not?
No spoilers.
It's not like it's not relevant.
Yeah, so Jiro, you see him in the beginning of the movie as a small child. And basically, yeah, he gets this dream to be an airplane engineer after having a dream shared with another guy. Let's not go into how that happened. Magic, let's just say that. And he's told by this famous engineer that you don't need to be a pilot to make planes, and he decides from there on he wants to make planes, and then time skip, he's an older gentleman.
Well, more like a high schooler.
Still.
Yeah. Time skip, and
He doesn't really go into
he's in high school, I guess, getting ready to be a plane engineer, and then after he graduates, another time skip, and he's already working in, I forget if it's
Still in Japan.
He starts working in Japan on planes, and then is hired, and then goes to work on them in Germany, and then...
Well, he's not necessarily working on them, he's studying.
So he's flying to Germany, and then eventually through a whole lot of wacky hijinks that aren't really that wacky. I couldn't think of a better word for it. But then he starts making the planes, and then pretty much ends with him finally making the plane. Vivi, you had something to say?
Oh, well, is it high school or college?
He's starting. I think he's like in high school, like when he starts. When you see him like moving to go to school, I'm pretty sure they mentioned that he was going to a university.
Yeah, okay, because it's just, he was living in a house alone, like, with a maid. And also, he mentions a freshman, but they're smoking.
Okay, I
So,
mean,
like-
he's
that
over
point he was-
18. The age of
Oh,
smoking in the
yeah.
United States is something like that. Not that people follow that rule anyways, but I'm not entirely sure what the age requirement is in Japan for that.
And it was a
Anyway.
different era, but...
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's that too.
Rules change between time.
Yeah.
Plus it's anime, who really gives a crap?
Well, you guys were talking about it, so who cares to an extent,
Hey,
right?
come on, guys. The movie
Although
was based
I
in a
will
time.
say this, the one good thing that I do know about the film that I was very happy about was the music and the sound. The sound
Yes.
quality was good, the sound was great. The scene at the beginning of the earthquake was very dramatic.
I would say so.
Because at that point in time, that was viewed as what many Japanese had felt was a giant just getting woken up underneath the earth. So that whole part of the film was probably the most spectacular to see.
Are you talking
And if I have to say one thing that was probably the worst thing was probably Jiro's voice actor performance. Granted, I do enjoy the voice actor that did play him in this English adaptation. I just didn't really like his performance here because it didn't sound clear enough. If you're going to do voice acting, the biggest thing that you have to keep in mind is clarity. If the audience can't hear or understand what you're saying, how can they be invested in your character?
Yeah, going off of what he said, it almost sounded like he was like whispering and mumbling half of his lines, which was sort of frustrating because it's like, okay, what are you saying?
And also, from what I remember seeing, I guess we pretty much moved into negative here. We'll go back to characters in a little bit. But he didn't seem to show too much emotion, if you ask me, throughout the movie. Like, he seemed to have like the same tone, which isn't a problem necessarily, because there are certain character types that do work with that, but he doesn't come across as trying to be that kind of character.
Yeah, like even toward his love interest, he'd be like, "Love you too, babe. So sad. I love you."
Let's not talk about the love
That's the
issue.
thing, though. It felt like the entire story was deliberately trying to leave out certain bits of what was actually going on. I mean, sure, they talk about the bomb being dropped, but there's an entire other story to that.
Yeah.
You know, just one thing. I'll go back on topic after this. The bombs didn't actually need to be dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Japan was already like really low on resources, and they would have had to surrender eventually. The reason the bombs were dropped was to test the nukes.
Actual military reason. The reason is because Japan did not want to surrender. They did not even want to surrender.
Sure, but they
after
would have
the
ran
two-
out of resources.
They would have ran out of resources. But let me finish talking. What I'm trying to say, and then we will get back on topic, is the fact that the Japan did not want to surrender. Hence why the bombs were bombed, and the Empire even had to say, "No, we're done. We can't do this anymore. We won't have a country."
Yeah.
Back on topic. And I will say, going off that, the reason I think like why there wasn't details given about the bombs is it didn't really matter
I mean,
to the story.
that's not even...
To the story, because I mean, how would we don't really see that because Giro, that's not his Giro. Like it's the same thing with like Final Fantasy 15. There's events you don't see happening in that game because our main characters wouldn't know about that.
Okay, but that's the thing. The bombs are just kind of a sample of stuff that was left out. Just the whole thing with like the war and everything. I mean, obviously that's talked about, and I'm not even saying that it's left out. But I'm just saying that the movie kind of gives a feel that there's just a lot of stuff going on that maybe wasn't completely irrelevant, but they're trying to censor out. Maybe because they don't want to touch on certain topics, or maybe because they're afraid that it wouldn't be appealing to the audience they're gearing what they're creating towards.
Well, you also have to keep in mind this is not a World War II film.
I mean,
this is
it's not.
This is a biographical film about a pilot or I shouldn't say a pilot,
Engineer.
engineer that was making planes that just so happened to be in the time period of
Yeah.
World War II. It's much like many other films that take place in certain time periods.
Yep.
Yes, that is going on, but that's not the main story that's happening.
Yeah, it's just a guy who wants to bring his ideas, the planes of his dreams to life, but unfortunately, the destiny of all planes is, no matter how beautiful you make them, no matter how well they fly, eventually they're converted to war.
It's like the dark definition that was said by the man that came into Jiro's dream.
Yeah,
You have to decide which world you want to be in, the world where pyramids are built or not. If you're in the world that pyramids are built, somehow that vision will turn into something dark, such as if you're building a plane, sometimes that might be turned into a weapon of war. But he still chooses to live in that world because he still wants to be that creator, so that way he can at least marvel at what he saw.
Alright. So moving on to one more negative thought, like the romance between him and his love interest. the best way I could describe this, and I think our Train Ninja will agree with it, it is a heck of a whirlwind romance. It's like one moment like they meet and then instantly married.
Yeah.
Pretty much right to be proposing. Like,
Yeah. And not to mention, wow, you are really taking that risk with your health, huh? I won't say why, because you'll have to hear it in the film, but just taking that much of a risk with your health, with the individual that has that particular disease. Ugh.
yeah. Like, the only biggest whirlwind romance I've ever seen is Thrall and Agron. That one was a weird one. So, shall we move on to back to characters?
Yeah.
I think we're sort of done.
Well, I mean,
We could say some things about the individual characters.
Yeah.
What about the short guy whose hair looked like flapping wings every time he walked?
Oh, I love
Fitting
his
for an
character.
fitting for an airplane
loved his
maker.
character. That was the epitome of a boss. Just a man that is wanting things done now, but still has enough attention and respect towards his workers that deserve it.
Like even one point he says they say he always hazes the new people, but it's like first day on the job you don't expect everything to go right. What, you think you're gonna end up at like top cop or something? For lack of a better word there.
Yeah, and even in the wedding ceremony scene, he made that comment, but at least he was doing it in a tasteful manner, and Jiro at least understood and just kind of took it as a laugh.
Or like when they switched his location, said they'll do as long as he's beneficial to the company, they will protect him. That's a pretty good thing to say, especially with what was going on around that era.
Mm-hmm.
What about that one guy who's like his best friend through most of the movie? What was his name?
Oh shoot, I forgot his name already.
I thought it
Unforgettable
was
best friend character.
The guy who was stuck, who was,
Shone?
well, whatever his name. He seemed like to be the main character's best friend, even though they kind of parted ways when they were both stationed in Germany.
Again, he's just the unforgettable best friend character. He does his role. He fits in the story.
I really liked how they did Jiro's sister. What was her name?
The one studying to be a doctor.
But yeah, the one studying to be a doctor and who kept sort of, I guess,
Getting angry at him?
well, getting angry at him, but for the right reasons.
The Tsundere sister.
Yes, but unlike most Cinderation, she was always slightly funny to listen to. That's funny, it's like watching Rin freak out.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like she's the character who's always checking in on the main character every few time skips, to be honest.
Yeah, she was just kind of there. I think overall we've kind of touched on all of the weak points of the film. It's sad to say because this is by one of the most well-respected anime directors in history. And to see him create a film that should have more weight to it, be filled with so much negativity, just is kind of hurtful in a lot of ways. It would be nice for it to be a nice, more positive and well-deserved film, but there's too many negatives to really make it as bright as it could be.
What do you mean by bright and positive in this context?
Because it's a well-respected individual in Japan's history. Granted, it's from a dark time in history, but an individual that deserves a lot of respect.
Yeah.
And to see a film that is dedicated to him be filled with so many negative points just makes the film a lot less respectable.
When I brought up like things about the war, and you were like, actually, it's they really didn't need to touch on all those things, and you're probably right. What would have made this film, better? I guess.
Well, first off, the biggest thing, granted this is from the English dubs department, but just choose someone else that would have been better for the part. Granted, I like the actor, but it would have been better to have that. Secondly, it needed something a lot more attentive, much as like with the earthquake scene. Great capture of all that. But overall, I think the film just needed a lot more attention grab to keep the story focused and to keep it all the more motivating for the character and for the audience. Because if you don't have the audience grabbed at the very first 15 minutes of your film is going to be a long drag.
So,
Or like
as
other,
you're-
this
other
case,
things
it
that could
was-
also work, like take out the whirlwind romance. If you got to put in the love interest, make it so it's actually like we
Right.
see their relationship develop. Don't.
Make it solid.
Yeah.
There's something that
Like, it was really weird to have them meet as, like, young girl, old man, and then have him not age, have her age, and then all of a sudden just,
I think she's more saying like it's more evidence the girl was aging than the guy.
yeah.
I see our cameraman looks like he's getting a little confused.
one thing I've noticed is his Wikipedia page doesn't talk about her at all. So
Okay,
I'm
let's
wondering if she
not.
actually-
You shouldn't really be relying on Wikipedia because remember.
Well, yeah, I know
this
Wikipedia isn't the only reliable source.
That's not what I'm getting in.
Okay.
Just ask. What
Okay.
Come on,
What I'm
guys,
saying
that's
is,
stupid.
anime movies like this, they always take in, like Bridge of Spies with Tom
The
Hanks,
biggest
like
thing
that,
you have
edit
to
some
keep-
information. Like this
Yeah,
might
I
relying
know.
on Wikipedia for the anime. If you're
So
looking
there
at
is
the
something
little guys
that
that
there's
don't
another
want-
thing from the
Word of-
page that I actually would like to hear people's opinions on. But
Word of the wise, whenever you're making any sort of film, whether it be on historical fact or fiction, you always want to make sure that there's something in it to keep your audience at attention.
yeah,
And in this case, if that is the case with the historical information, sure, they may add a few things just to make it all the more interesting, because it becomes really boring when you have a film dedicated to a meeting where all it is just a bunch of guys sitting in a room, and there's no action, there's no romance, there's no drama involved that makes the film hyped up and embellished into what it is. Because whenever you hear about any sort of story, you need something to make it exciting. So if you have to add different elements, you do. If
Yeah.
it makes the story all the more interesting, then that's what you need to do.
Although it's not that bad of a movie, I mean, I'm glad they did a sort of a historical aspect for it. And yes, a love interest may have been brief, but even though how tragic it may have been in the end.
All right. On that note, I think we should move on to scoring.
although before before we go, like as far as like how the character was portrayed, this has some excerpts from his journal. This one is, for the first time, I really saw the effects of the incendiary raids on Nagoya. The city is a wasteland, charred and unspeakably desolate. My former factory is ghostly steel-ribbed wreck, shattered by bombs and torn apart by the Despiral crews. It is hard to believe that all this is true. I know that soon I will be well. Strangely, though, I had little desire to return to work. The impression of the shattered city and the wrecked factories will not leave me. And this was... he was ill with something. I can't remember exactly what they said it was. But in his diary, I guess, he talks a lot about how he doesn't really want to stay doing this. So that seems a little bit different than how he was, in the movie where it's like, I know that this is how my work is being used, but I still want to do it anyways,
Something that they possibly included because they didn't think it would work for the story, or possibly the event hasn't happened movie-wise.
Maybe.
That's all I'm going to say. On that note, scoring. I'm going to give this 3 out of 5 sponge cakes.
Why sponge cakes?
Because it was in the movie and I thought it'd be funny.
Okay. I don't remember sponge cakes being in the movie.
They were there.
They mentioned them several times.
Oh, okay. 4 out of 5.
A 4.5 out of 5.
I'm gonna say 4 out of 5.
I really don't want to give a good score, but I don't really want to give a terrible score either. I will give it 2 mackerel bones out of 5.
Matt?
I struggle to give this movie any higher than 3 out of 5 sponge cakes.
So
Really? You gonna repeat what I
3.5
said?
Out of
Please come up with
30.
something new, man.
So, 30 out of 40? No.
No, it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
There were a lot of 4s.
25.5 out of 30. I
Okay.
think.
So,
How do you have 25?
not bad.
Oh wait, no. Shoot, I don't know. You're 4.
I was a 3.
You're 3.
Everyone else was 4, but
Anyway,
Matt-
all this talk of sponge cakes and mackerels is making me hungry.
alright. Well, we're gonna sign off and get poached or some food. Catch us next time as we watch Rolling Girls. This is the MCTC Anime Club signing off.